Hey there, Amplifiers. Kenny Harper here, and today we have someone who is really kind of a guide when it comes to overcoming conflict or going through transformation. He's the founder of Mindful Communication, and he is a conflict transformation coach. So I'd like to welcome to Growth Amplifiers, Jonathan Miller. Jonathan, welcome to Growth Amplifiers.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, glad to have your energy, and really glad to have someone come in to the conversation when it comes to conflict. You know, right now, especially, there's a lot of conflict going around, and
Amen.
People need to kind of get some new tools to be using in that conversation so that they can approach this situation in a positive way. So, Jonathan, you have this wonderful company, and if you could tell a little bit more about who you are and what you do, that would be awesome.
Certainly. So I am a conflict transformation coach. That's probably the first time you've ever heard that title, and that's because I made it up. But there's a very deliberate thing behind it. The idea behind conflict transformation is actually a pretty novel concept that comes from the peace and conflict studies, like the academic realm. But as I was doing a lot of my research in kind of the realm of conflict, particularly relational conflict, I'm talking about conflict that we have in our lives with our business partners, with our family, with friends, just kind of day-to-day conflict that we deal with. When I was doing that, there's this idea that kind of emerged from it, this idea that conflict is this inevitability in life. It's something that happens to all of us. You, Kenny, you've dealt with it. I've dealt with conflict. Our listeners here have dealt with conflict. And guess what? We're going to continue to deal with conflict for the rest of our lives.
Yay.
And yeah, fun, right? And so when you start to think about conflict as this inevitable phenomenon, what kind of came to me is I spent my whole life avoiding conflict. And what I started doing is arming myself with these kind of tools. Arming sounds kind of like, military, but it's more just like giving myself the resources to be able to handle these situations more powerfully. And ultimately, what I noticed was that I was resolving these conflicts, but I wasn't just resolving it. I was actually transforming them. And all of a sudden, I had people who I initially saw as some of the most difficult people in my life were all of a sudden my partners. They were my partners. They were my co-conspirators in making amazing things happen. And so it's this idea of transforming our conflicts into something useful, into a tool for growth, into amazing relationships, amazing partnerships. So that's kind of my realm of expertise. And what I do is I work one-on-one with clients to do that. I work in workshop settings. I facilitate as well. And I also have a podcast. So I love talking about the realm of communication at large and definitely diving into this realm of conflict transformation, conflict management.
Jonathan, I think that's really powerful because I'm thinking as you're talking about this, and I remember, I'm not going to name any names, but I remember working for an agency, and there was a great team, a great group of people, but somewhere along the line, things got kind of political, not like right and left political, but just conflict with different interests of different members on the team. And then you had this team that probably could create some amazing things together, like you're saying, but unfortunately, because they didn't have a good approach to how to deal with that conflict, it ended up just causing some people to leave, some people to fight, and it just killed the productivity and creativeness overall.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a pretty standard story that you'd hear kind of in anyone's life, right? Conflict arises, we don't know how to deal with it, and then we go and we mimic these patterns that we see everyone else doing. If you look at the media, how do people deal with conflict? I don't know. They yell at each other. They boulder into conversations without really thinking things through, point fingers. These are all very unhelpful ways to deal with conflict, passive aggressive comments, sarcasm, all of those things. And yet, when you really think about it, those are our automatic reactions. Those are the tools that most of us know, definitely me. I am very familiar with those tools, still to this day, very well practiced using those tools. And there are other tools available. And with practice, you can make those your default reactions when the going gets tough.
Now, I like that you are a good communicator. That's one of the things that you have on your website. And you can tell when listening to you, you can take ideas and communicate them in a way that maybe they're complicated, but you explain them in a way that people can get them, understand them, and appreciate them. And how much does communication come into the conversation when you're talking about resolving conflict?
That's an interesting question, actually. When I think about it, I always saw communication as this really important thing in life. I think it's the skill.
Mhm.
Because when we're talking about life and we're particularly talking about our businesses, any of our listeners know if they're entrepreneurs, if they're business owners, their business is built on relationships. That's just how that goes. And when we're talking about how we conduct our relationships, the main ingredient to conducting our relationships is communication. So those relationships wouldn't exist without our ability to communicate with one another. There's also communication with ourselves. I really do believe that language shapes our world, it shapes our reality. Right before we hopped on this call, we were talking about this growth mindset. When it comes to that fixed versus growth mindset, you can even look at the language that you use or others use when they're in a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. It shapes your world, and it shapes the context of your world. And context is decisive. So that's why, kind of to answer your question, I mean, like communication is like, I think like so central and at the root of so much of all of this kind of stuff. Yeah.
So it can already tell by how you're communicating and the things you've expressed thus far that you do come to the table being very unique. Someone who might offer similar products or services and kind of do something similar in nature, how do you distinguish what you do and kind of elevate it versus somebody else who may offer something similar? What's a way that you differentiate yourself?
That's a good question. It's interesting too because on my podcast, the Mindful Communication podcast, I have lots of amazing communication experts on the show. And the reason I actually started the podcast was I wanted to be an expert as well. And so I created this opportunity where I get to talk to all these amazing communicators. And then I would read all of their books before they'd come on the show, and I would test out and learn what worked and what didn't work for me. But ultimately, what my clients have told me and what I've realized for myself that makes a real difference is that communication, there's kind of two sides of it. When we think of communication, we often think of the words that we're saying. If we say the right words, if we approach it with the right tone, the right body language, it will make a difference. And I think that that's true to an extent. But the other side of this, and this is a huge aspect, is in communication, there's what I would call a beingness that you bring to the conversation. There's a confidence, there's a power, there's a self-expression that you get to bring to the conversation. Those aren't things that I'm thinking about in my conversation. It's just who I am being. And that's actually where I spend a lot of time with my clients, is transforming that beingness that they're bringing into the conversation that allows them to flourish in any social situation, and then, just have that self-confidence in themselves to flourish in any situation. So whether that kind of explains what differentiates me or not, I'm going to leave it to you and leave it to our listeners what makes me different from other people. Sorry, that's the best answer I got for you right now.
Oh, I love the fact you have an answer, and the way I think your approach, how you kind of take these different ingredients from different thought leaders and bring them together. It's your own recipe, and
Yeah.
your style, your personality, that is definitely different.
And there is one other thing that has made a difference as well. And I'm
Mhm.
not sure how many other communicators do this, but a huge part of my life is my meditation practice. So about today it's June 2020. About 3 years ago, almost,
Mhm.
I discovered what's called Vipassana meditation. It's these really popular meditation retreats. They happen all over the world. Definitely a lot in North America. They're really popular. These silent retreats that everyone's going on. So I did my first one about almost three years ago, and it was super impactful for me. It completely changed my life, and for the last 3 years, without missing a single day, I've meditated for 2 hours a day every single day.
That's
And
impressive.
yeah, and I've sat, many silent meditation retreats. I think I've sat only six so far. I know I have friends who've sat much more than that, but 6 meditation retreats so far. And it has made a massive difference in terms of my ability to handle conflict, to communicate, and also bringing the wisdom that I've learned from that practice into the conversations that I have with clients and have them be able to find their own insights based on similar philosophies that help guide them through life and just see more ease and success with what it is that they're up to.
Awesome. Something I'm going to have to check out for sure. Right now I'm in day, I think 15 of the 21-day mind hacking challenge. And it's kind of like focusing on doing concentration exercises or meditation.
Yeah.
And I really have been enjoying that process. I've been doing meditation before, but definitely not to the level that you've mastered. And that's really something to appreciate. Now you have a lot of things going great. You're able to take great information from people, kind of funnel it down into picking out what works for you, helping share it with others. But what is something that you've found challenging on your journey, that when you've been trying to grow your business, that you found a little bit difficult? What's a hill that you've either had to overcome or you're currently working on overcoming?
That's a great question. And what immediately comes to mind is this idea of lead generation. So I'm a coach. I've been a coach now for a little while. I've been running my business for about 1.5 years. Going to be
Congrats.
thank you. I'm going to be certified soon. And I'm just kind of hitting this stride where I'm slowly starting to get referrals and starting to get more steady business. But lead and client generation has been really challenging, especially, everyone and their mother is a coach,
Right.
especially online. Like, their coaches are a dime a dozen. So the question is always, how do I separate myself? How do I get myself in front of other people? And how do people, especially in an online space, you can hear how animated I am
Right.
on this podcast. In person, I'm even better, let me assure you. But how do I consistently get myself in front of people and create the connection that allows me to actually have them be a yes to working with me? That's definitely been my biggest challenge so far in this journey of being a coach.
So that is something that, in Growth Amplifiers, we've got a lot of resources and things that we share. I'm glad to share some ideas that have been helpful for me on my journey as I've transitioned into coaching. And I've really found out, I don't want to get into a big segue on me, but for the first couple years that I was calling myself a coach, I was more just an advisor and had to learn what coaching actually was. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a big difference. And I think a lot of people right now that are online calling themselves a coach haven't really learned what coaching is even about.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. There's that education piece there as well, right?
right. So what are you doing actually to grow your business, gain awareness, and attract new customers? What's something that you are doing that's working?
Something that I'm doing that's working. Well, what really got me started on my business, and this is for all the coaches out there who are kind of really starting fresh,
Mm-hmm.
is I would get on as many phone calls as humanly possible. So I started with my own network and I messaged everyone from past and present, everyone on Facebook, like everyone on LinkedIn. I am messaging people like crazy. And I did that for so long. And I had so many conversations. And most of them did not result in any clients. Um, Most people didn't even respond. And then for the few people who respond, then there's only a selection that actually get on the phone with me. And then the selection that gets on the phone, a small percentage, actually, it's the perfect time. They're looking for something like this, da, da, da. And then we get on a call. And then an even smaller percentage actually say, yes, let's work together. And that has been successful.
Excellent. I was listening to a sales training once upon a time audiobook, Brian Tracy, and he talks
Yeah.
about this strategy of reaching out to 100 different people. It gives you a finite number. It's like, if you reach out to 100 different people and you make these contacts, you might not get business immediately, but it's going to generate business. And if it's
Yeah.
not, you got to look at kind of what's going on with that.
Yeah.
Obviously it depends on what you're selling, but I do like that approach. That's very disciplined, and I appreciate that. So Jonathan, what's something that you're working on right now that you'd like to share? What's something that you could tell others that you're working on? You have the podcast. Let people know a little bit more about how they can connect with you and the things that you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the podcast is a great place for all things communication. It's called the Mindful Communication Podcast. So I release about an episode about every week. You can also check out my website, mindfulcommunication.me. I have 2 awesome resources on there. The first is actually a free training resource. I put a lot of time and energy in this. It is a 4-part video training series, and there's email accompaniment. It is awesome. And it's all about conflict transformation. It's about discovering what conflict is, how it looks like in your life. And it gives you a solid model that I use with my clients on how to start transforming the conflict in your life, as well as these follow-up emails so that you can continue to practice. And the whole thing, actually, with the videos are about 40 minutes. And then it takes another like 2 weeks just to move through the motions. And after these 2 weeks, you're going to see a palpable difference in your ability to handle conflict. So that's a great free resource. And then the other one is my Tough Talks Made Easy tool. And what it is if you or any of our listeners have a difficult conversation that they've been avoiding and they want some help with that, they want some assistance with that, what we do is we get on a 45-minute call, me and them. And what we do is we hash out kind of like a game plan, a roadmap for how to have that tough conversation with ease, with confidence, painlessly, and say it in a way that sounds natural and powerful to you. So that kind of is a tool you can check out on my website, and you can use the promo code GROWTH50 for 50% off. Thanks for listening to this podcast.
Super cool, Jonathan. Thank you for sharing that. Mindful communication, definitely something that you want to take into consideration. You know, I've been a student of communication. I'm a Toastmaster. I don't know if you're familiar with Toastmasters.
Yeah.
But I think communication is the most powerful skill that you can develop. And a lot of people think, oh, I can talk. I've been talking since I was a little kid. But there's a difference between talking, letting words fall out your face, and being a communicator that inspires and gets people to shift their perception and get them into action. And I think if you're wanting to be a leader, you need to develop mindful communication skills. So Jonathan, thank you for sharing those resources. Thank you for sharing your information and joining us on Growth Amplifiers. It's been great having you.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
To show your support, take a moment to amplify this message by sharing it online. To connect with me or gain more business growth insights, visit www.growthamplifiers.com. Thank you for your support.